Call to order. Donna Mangle could not make it this evening, so second choice I'm here. This evening we're going to cover some budget items, and our meeting tonight is the fourth in a series of scheduled to review the preliminary budget for the 97-98 fiscal year. It is being videotaped for community cable channels. Individuals attending this meeting and intending to speak to the board should be aware that they are being videotaped. In order to meet the requirements of Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, it is necessary to record the names of all citizens who speak to the board during the meeting. To assure compliance with the requirement, it is essential that those planning to address the board come to the microphone and state their name and address. Members of the audience are asked to limit their questions and comments to no more than 5 minutes. This limit will permit time for all those who wish to speak to the board. Whenever members of the audience exceed this time limit, the board president may ask the individual to yield the microphone to the next speaker. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Bowes, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. As Mr. Hill has already indicated, this is the fourth of a series of committee meetings or working sessions on the preliminary budget for the school year 1997-98. Generally speaking, in normal and average human experience, one likes to see public budgets as small as they can be. And so if we measure that by percent or millage increase, you might say that the North Penn School District is making progress. The budget at the third printing, which is still the subject of this fourth session, is at 2.5 mils increase over the 96-97 budget. I am confident tonight that you will hear in some of the reports the likelihood of further reductions. And the work that will be done between now and the next printing of the budget, the fourth version of the budget, I feel will get close to 2, if not under 2 mils. So at this point, picking up where we left off the last time, and not repeating ourselves in the interest of a beautiful spring evening and brevity in what could be a long meeting, I would remind the board there was a brief introduction by myself and by Dr. Miller on administration and administration support. I have provided on what would amount to the second page after this agenda an outline of administration as it's found in the third printing of the full budget, noting the pages in the preliminary budget where those positions are funded. And I would remind everybody that funding that affects adjustments to compensation for the next budget year are still pending resolution and conclusion by the Board of School Directors. So 2% was built in, knowing that as that was footnoted and conspicuously displayed to be a tentative number subject to a finalization that is nearing its completion but not yet complete. And so at this point, both Dr. Miller and I stand ready to answer questions or to assist the board as it moves on to cover other sections of the budget. But I would consider the administrative part of the budget presented and ready for discussion and questions.
Thank you. One other item for the record, the board did meet an executive session previous to this meeting to cover some items related to legal questions and personnel items. That meeting was held between 6:15 and 7:30 this evening. Let's move ahead then.
Mr. President, I would invite questions on the administrative parts of the budget, if there are any. And if there aren't any, Mr. Wood would be prepared to present an orientation, overview of business services and so forth.
Is there any questions the board has related to the administration budget as outlined in the budget?
I'm trying to go through all those pages.
Yeah,
Yeah, we should have, I'd hoped we'd gotten this ahead of time because I see there's an awful lot of pages here that relate to this administration section.
Well, the second page is a quick overview for you. I'll tell you there are no additions to the number of administrators in the school district. There are, the number of those positions are listed on that page titled Administration. And you'll see that there are 17 principals, 9 assistant principals, 4 curriculum supervisors, 4 special education supervisors, 6 directors, 6 others that include coordinator of transportation, facilities, community services, athletic director, assistant director of human relations, and technology manager, 1 assistant superintendent, and 1 superintendent.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. I did have a question on page 30.
Those numbers are the same.
I did have a question on page 34. ASN number 1603, sorry. 16004, secretarial salaries, community ed. I see we have almost gone from 24,000 to 56,000.
Dr. Miller, that's a question about secretaries.
And that, we can talk about that, Dr. Bose, but that's not in the 2,300 category that we're covering tonight under administration.
I expected we would review that at our next session.
Right.
When we would have the subject of community ed on the schedule.
Right.
The agenda.
Well, I see page 34 here.
That's
What am I
a double
looking at on page 34 then?
The 1690 supervisor category, probably.
I got it, okay,
Under administration.
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, we missed this area under 22.
That's part of Gail's stuff.
I thought they were going to get rid of
Any other questions, Pat? We can come back to you.
Yeah, that's all I have, Don. I'm trying to page through these pages. That's all I have right now.
We'll get back to you.
Okay.
Sharice, you have any questions?
Well, yeah, I do.
You're allowed to ask.
I guess my first question is, what page can I find the 9 assistant principals?
They're with principals. They're included in that same line for each of the principals that have an assistant.
83, 84?
Right.
I don't see that, Dr. Bose.
Well, you won't see the word assistant principals on page 80, excuse me.
Dr. Bose, if I could help you, it's on page 83, number 23024. It'll say Principal North Penn Senior High School. All the positions are included under that.
Right. See this?
There are no assistants in the elementary schools, so the assistants' salaries are included in the secondary schools' principal lines.
But the assistant principals at Penndale are under the Penndale account, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
These are the ones for the high school, and then Penndale has the ones for Penndale. Same thing with Penfield and Pembroke.
Okay, how many assistant principals do we have at the high school and each of the middle schools, please?
There are 5.
At the high school?
Yes, ma'am.
And 1 each at the middle schools, or there's 2
There
somewhere?
are 2 at Penndale, 1 each at Field and Brook.
Okay. Now I have to go back here.
We can come back, Sharice, if you want.
Well,
You ready?
I guess, okay, on page 77, please, under superintendent, the first line item there, 23006. I realize there's further discussion in regards to the increase, however, in calculating this figure here, I show that at 2%, it should actually be 131,580.
He gives 3. He's going to be on track.
The actual percent is calculated on the consumer price index for April of this year, which we don't have yet.
Right.
Okay, so what percentage is this calculated at?
I think
please?
I think Mr. Mosey is right. I think it was a straight 2% that was figured for all.
That's what I'm saying, but at
Yeah.
2%, it should be
You're right.
131,580.
Well, you're right, Mrs. Krieger, and also the 96, 97 figure is wrong as well.
Well, is that a year-to-date total,
That's.
I'm
the-
assuming?
It should be.
And that's
No,
incorrect.
not year-to-date, it should be the exact number for 96,
So come
97.
out to 129.
See, this has been part of my confusion, Don, is that we've had some presentations up to this point where salaries have been given to us year-to-date, and then there's other areas of the budget where the salaries are recorded at what was budgeted, and things like that. So it's very confusing.
May I help you with that, please? The way that the salaries should be projected in this entire budget is based on the actual salary, and it's a total year salary because it's an encumbered amount. So under an estimated, you will typically see the salary that has been projected and approved by the board last year prior to July 1. And that is the actual salary, and it shows as an encumbrance. In other words, we have encumbered it under the estimate because that person, and that's making the assumption that they will be with us, will be paid in fact through June 30th, 1997.
Your estimated is your most accurate
Right.
projection
The
of the
estimated for
expense,
salary
of actual
is very
spending.
easy. The estimated for things that change throughout, between now and the closing of the budget is more difficult.
I should raise a point.
But we
The budgeted
budgeted
number, the
129,000.
estimated number should be the same, as far as salaries are concerned.
Not necessarily. When the budget's adopted, you may not know what the actual salary for that personnel is actually gonna end up approved at, because it may be filled at a later time.
No, that's.
Yeah, but in this case, we would
In some
know
cases, that's
because,
true.
because
Well,
we're
he's
talking
under
Dr.
contract.
We're talking Dr. Bo's salary. If we're going to pay him 129,000, then the
Okay,
estimation.
well, wait a minute. If you're talking about that not equaling 2% under the superintendent, I'd like to remind you that he's under a contract
Right.
that has a stipulation.
Right.
That is not negotiable at this
That's
point.
correct. It can,
I know, that's
And we-
why I
and we
brought
won't
it
know
up,
that
because it's not
percent.
adding up.
Right.
Until the end of the month.
That one is not accurate.
right.
No, it's not accurate, and that was the point I was trying
But
to
it
make.
wasn't budgeted accurately last year either.
That's correct.
Right.
No.
So
Because we
I
didn't, it'll
guess-
never be budgeted
It will
accurately.
never be budgeted
Right,
accurately
because it's
because
based
you
on the
don't know.
CPI.
It can be budgeted in the
Right.
final budget.
If the
accurately.
CPI comes out in April and we don't approve this till the end of June, then it should be accurate
Yeah.
Right, but
in
you
the final
probably-
document.
Probably
Right,
won't
right.
get,
The
you
final
won't get,
document it will get.
as
So
Dr.
what I'm
Bose-
saying is that if that 129,000 was inaccurate on June 30th last year,
It should not have been.
it should not have been. So I personally would like to see that corrected.
And it will be corrected, but it can't be corrected more than likely until adoption of the final budget.
Right.
Because you won't
Right.
get April CPI
Right, till May.
until May.
Right.
Fine. Okay, you still have a month to do it though, right? Okay.
You're right.
Okay, moving on, Dr. Bose, to your employee benefits, oh, no, I'm sorry, technical services. I see an $8,200 increase in what you're proposing.
Where are you at, what page?
Oh, I'm sorry, 78. 23325, technical services. I see an $8,200 increase in what was budgeted. Now, is this budgeted according to CPI too? And what the estimated is, and then what Dr. Bose wants next year, which is to me a really huge increase. So I'd like some explanation on that.
Well, I think maybe the best way to direct the board's attention to the totality of the thing is to look at the total of the 2360 series and see it's down over $10,500. So there are some changes within all those lines that reflect a better working knowledge of things like postage expenses, the cost of newsletters, and matters like that that show that the movement is both up and down. Now, you're directing your question, Mrs. Krieger, at specifically at technical services.
Correct. I was just curious as to the need for an $8,200 increase in that particular category. As well as.
For instance, the board might recall the potential need for consultant services of a technical nature as it might relate to medical insurance and medical insurance negotiations with the carrier, where we may wish to employ a consultant to provide technical services. Also may relate to our current experience with an outside auditing firm looking over our business operations for the purpose of providing advice and recommendations. This is simply a safe number.
But why wouldn't we show those particular items being budgeted in the departments that are responsible for those areas then?
Well, we could.
I believe there are dollars for personnel.
But if I initiate the expenditure, it would be under my jurisdiction.
I see. Okay. Dr. Bose, the reduction in what was budgeted for postage for this year and only 1,000 next year, are we not sending out anything this year from your office?
Well, it was Mr. Kelly's idea that the postage be moved, I think, to a more appropriate location. I don't remember where it is at this point, but that accounts for the drop. Where?
I believe it's all assigned to individual departments instead of it all falling under you.
Well, I saw it divvied up between the schools, but I couldn't find any other place in the budget where postage.
There's
It's
postage,
in the 1200 series.
there's postage in the business office, and this year we had a budgeted amount of 24,000. Next year we're showing 9,000.
Prior to this year, the Educational Service Center budget for postage was divided among 3 offices. It had always been divided among the Community Relations Office, the Business Office, and the Superintendent's Office. I believe we would find that it has been spread and divided among other additional offices. And regarding the superintendent's postage and the postage for newsletter, we see the budgeted amount for 96-97 as contrasted or compared to the budgeted amount for 97-98, and the difference isn't as big as it would appear on individual lines, you see. It's just a shifting of numbers there. I don't know if that helps or not, Mrs. Krieger.
For instance, Mrs. Krieger,
I know, and I don't want to have
we're
to.
publishing a newsletter this year that was not budgeted as a postage cost last year. So as you can see on the 2360 line, there is a budget for the newsletter postage for next year that did not appear this year. That's one of the adjustments that Mr. Weir was addressing in his.
I'm sorry, Dr. Bose, where is this?
Under 2360, ASN 2360, postage newsletter. That's the newsletter, for instance, it's one that goes out this week.
Okay.
Community newsletter. It was not a budgeted item this year and in the previous year.
Yes, it was, Dr.
Yes.
Bose. You got $50,000 to do that newsletter this year.
That was not the postage, that was the.
That was the
The
newsletter.
printing.
That was the
The printing. This further breaks down the number.
What are we printing on, gold-plated
I'm like-
printing presses? My understanding was that 50,000 was to cover, and that was high to me. I mean, I've been in mass mailing situations throughout this community, but then you're saying the 50,000 last year was to print it, and that there was additional money spent beyond 50,000 for postage?
I think the 50,000 included everything.
Okay.
That's correct.
That this is an effort to separate the printing from the postage.
50,000.
And the mail handling charges.
And how much is being designated for this purpose within all these various accounts? How much are you asking the board
In totality.
to provide funds for in newsletter communication.
May we review that at our next meeting? I don't have the breakdown sheets with me tonight, I apologize. I wasn't planning to discuss that with you tonight. I'll be happy to help explain that.
If you could, so we can look through these items. I know some may be for technical
It would be my
services for
plan to
another
explain.
purpose.
And I think
Okay, that's fine.
one thing the board really needs to decide, because I feel somewhat embarrassed about this, and I feel embarrassed for my colleagues when you do this to us. There's some feeling on the board, you want it all lumped together. What's a newsletter cost? $50,000 was the figure last year. That included postage, printing, and all the related preparation work to the printing, and the company that handles the sorting for mailing. Now this year, the word came to us, we want that broken down, put it into various line items. So it would help us if you simply decided, maybe you have to do this by majority vote if we're listening to individual voices, and we probably should be listening to individual voices. It's not that we're trying to deceive you, and I don't think you're trying to find an error and embarrass somebody having found it. I think the problem is, we're not sure what you want, and maybe you're not sure what you want. The newsletter cost in its totality, in last year's projection, that we're now spending this year, $50,000. Somebody spoke to the person who developed this first budget and said, break it down further. Mailing, printing, and if there's another fee, if it's preparation, if it's word processing, or mail handling and sorting, break it down. So if it's done that way in this budget, and now there's some discomfort with the fact that it's not all.
All right, Dr. Brown, I think we bring about a point, but this particular case, I think the board is just asking, and Ken Ware said he could do that. He could pull together what the newsletter is going to cost, and we can answer that
I'll
question.
review all that at the
Well,
next
Don,
meeting.
can I just point something else
Yeah,
out?
go
Because
ahead.
in this year, if you look at the budget column for this year on page 78, in the estimated, down at 2360, you had 26,500 in postage, okay? And then if you drop down to the next one under newsletter and annual report for printing, there was another 25,000. I'm assuming that's the 51,500.
We take those two figures.
Okay, but in the estimated, there was only 8,500 spent this year. So if you add up the 26,500 and 8,500, that doesn't come anywhere near to
Well, he's got to get the
51.
information for what's in the budget this year for the newsletter.
Okay.
I don't think it was.
Until he has that, let's not
Right.
try to pull it apart here tonight.
Well, I thought that's what we were here
It'd be
for.
about, well, no, they were,
Are we
that's
not
under
supposed to
a
go
different
through
part of
this?
the budget.
Huh?
That's under Ken Ware's part.
Services.
I
No,
won't
it's under
speak for the
support.
superintendent, but I believe it was the superintendent's intention tonight to speak about personnel. Certainly any printing that's done for the superintendent, any mailing that's done for the superintendent, I had intended to discuss at our next meeting.
Well, just,
Well, that's
so I'm
really-
clear, the whole budget process was geared for an orderly progression through the budget without skipping back and forth. And as we went through, that we would cover it by department and be able to continue, because last year it became very confusing for people. Not only were we bouncing between two books, but we were jumping all over the place in pages. If we're now gonna go, suddenly start, as we did the past departments, we covered whatever was within those departments that we had questions on. We're gonna pick out by object and just cover certain objects within that and then revisit. I can understand if he does not know, just how much of this budget is with the newsletter, rather than have a wrong answer. I certainly would rather wait for that to be brought forward. And I don't think anyone thought that they were causing an uncomfortable situation.
Well, he's going to bring the information forward on the newsletter. Sharice, is there any other questions that you need clarification on?
I'm sure there will be, but at
Well, you
this
can come
point.
back. Let me go to Bill while you look at it. Bill, any questions?
Yes, of the 48 people listed on your handout tonight,
Yes.
I just want confirmation that those are all positions that we have approved in the past and the associated salaries.
These are the same number of positions, the same positions, and the salaries have all been approved by the Board of Education for the current school year, as will be the case for the next school year as you know you've been discussing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
No
Any other
more.
questions? Mr. Weiss?
No questions.
Sheree, Vicki?
Under the school and community services, there's a, under the secretarial.
Where you at? Help me.
Okay, I'm sorry, page 80. Page 80, the secretarial community relations area is dropping, and yet I don't know of any reduction in staff. Is this something specific, Ken, that's created the drop from $95,670 as an estimated expense to $58,965?
Well, I think there are a combination of circumstances there. We did lose a veteran employee, Eileen Peters, who was in last year's budget. She was no longer employed. She resigned. Her workstation at present is filled by a part-time person. It's not a full-time position. That's one factor.
Did Eileen stay throughout the year?
She went out at the end of the year.
Throughout this year?
Throughout past
No.
year.
That's what I
Last year.
meant. But then that estimated, but I'm talking from the estimated and what they expect to spend. And that wouldn't have been an expense. That would have been already affecting your estimated balance for within this 96, 97 budget, Ken. I'm just wondering, I'm just trying to check the accuracy one way or another. I'll take it if it's.
What you need is a clarification on that account.
If that's the case, then Eileen Peters actually would not have affected, that effect would have been on our estimated balance.
You're speaking to the estimated for
Right.
this year.
What is estimated for it to have cost, and then it's showing that after this fiscal year, there will be a drop.
Judy, can you help me?
Yes, I can. Vicki, if it would, Mrs. Shear, excuse me, if it would
That's okay.
help you, as you know, each of the ASNs have certain numbers of people underneath them.
Sure.
And under the 23009, there are only 2 people that fall under that category for next year.
Okay.
Okay, and their salaries total that amount of money, if that's helpful for you.
And we had additional people under that category for this year? You think?
I believe that there were a few, but their ASN numbers have been changed.
Okay.
So where are those salaries?
Well, they're all over the place, Mrs. Krieger.
Can
Okay.
you see there's the problem?
Okay, I just wondered if there was actually, I didn't know of
Actually, there
relations
is.
reducing staff significantly.
If I could help, there is no problem, to be honest with you. Every single person that we have is accounted for under specific account numbers. And those people are available for you to see if you need to see those.
Okay. I'd just like to bring up at this time something I discussed with Dennis prior, during the course of the year, in finding that sometimes we rely on our substitutes, and actually those substitutes are working rather regularly. I'd say 90% of their time with a specific department and are considered an employee within that department in their assignment. In those cases, I would like us to designate them for that department, so we realize what the staffing levels are. I mean, in some cases, we have this general category, a pool of substitutes, when in fact, they are actually a support staff working a regular placement within the district.
We can certainly talk.
I can talk to you about the
that.
specific
Yeah.
instances, but it gives you a false image of staffing levels in that case.
Okay, we can certainly talk about that, Mrs. Shear.
And as we go through all this, can we just, as you've said, Dr. Bose, there really are only 2% increases going through with all of the staff essentially. Non-union staff, support staff, secretarial staff,
That's correct.
because, whether we're talking custodians or bus drivers or what have you, the
That's
designation would be 2%.
Any other questions, Vicki? While you're looking, I'll go back to Sharice. Do you have any questions, Sharice?
I've one.
Well, only to say that, last year when we went through the budget process, I believed that, the board had been pretty specific on making this a user-friendly budget. And now to go through it and find further shifting of the money from here to there, from that department to this department, under this account, under that account, it is a problem. It's a problem for me to be able to go through this document and find what I'm looking for and be able to justify the numbers. And when I see significant drops in what's being asked to be budgeted for next year compared to what we've spent out in some of these categories, it's a problem because I don't have the answers, and that's what we're here for. And each and every time we come and we bring these things up, we find out that the budget has actually become more of an unfriendly
Sharice, can I
document.
help you by, if, I can help.
I'm just frustrated,
I
Tom.
understand. Would it be helpful for you that if you could find some time to maybe sit down with Judith and find out where these numbers are to make you feel
Well, I mean,
comfortable?
I just want to make sure that what we're actually budgeting, and if we get to item number, where's it on the agenda? 6 tonight, I plan to point out exactly what I'm talking about under extra duty. So, it's just, it's, right now, it's like, Dennis has, or somebody in the finance department or the administrators have done a fine job in further diluting the monies in what's being asked for in particular areas and beefing it up in others. And then we feel like we're sitting here and micromanaging, which is not my intent. When I see under the category that Vicki was relating to, secretarial community relations, and see 87,000 budgeted for this year that we're in, but yet we're actually going to spend out 95,000, that's a problem for me.
Well, we
And
can
then
get that
next year, we're
clarified.
only going to spend 58,000. Well, where's the other 40-something thousand?
So you're asking for a better clarification on that particular line item?
In any of them that look different like that. The newsletter, I mean, Ken said
newsletter
it's
was
been
gonna get us
split, but yet I look at community relations under postage and it's a 0. So, I mean, where are we mailing and where's the money coming from to mail it out? I mean, it's just, I feel like I'm in a shell game.
I have a general question.
Yes,
Before you
ma'am.
skipped off. On the assistant superintendent on page 90, there is a listing for in-service support staff. That's you, Dr. Haskell. Your turn on that.
Where are you at?
90?
Well, it's under other administrative services, and it does, well, maybe, perhaps it's not. It's assistant superintendent of curriculum.
What page?
Leads the page 90. Next to the bottom, we've got another in-service account here. An in-service account for support staff. What staff is this that's pulled out into a separate,
That's our support staff, secretaries and aides,
within a certain department?
all the departments. It's everything,
Okay, so this is the support staff
for the entire district.
for the secretarial needs, okay. Just to know.
If we're only spending 6,000 this year, why do we have to budget 10,000 next year?
We don't know completely what the cost of some of the programs will be. Many of our support staff take courses, and the price of those go up. And we wanted to make sure that we had budgeted enough money just in case that would come through. We budgeted 10,000 for this past year. The estimate is for 6,000, but that doesn't mean that we won't use more than that by the end of the year.
You say it's a possibility you could spend additional $4,000 between now and June.
I don't know that we would spend all of that, Mr. Mosey, but the $10,000 was budgeted. We certainly can make adjustments after we see what that will be. But we had budgeted 10,000 originally for this year. Well, 96, 97.
Yeah, you're budgeting the same amount as last year.
Right.
I would think that development takes place at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I mean, you said we're paying for coursework for our
Well, for instance,
support staff?
there's a software change in some of the word processor computers that the secretaries use. And many of them have recently completed new training to use that software. That service or that training is funded from this part of the budget. And as Mr. Mosey has pointed out, the projection is for no increase, and the estimate for expenditure this year is roughly 6,000. Now, that's a guess, it's an estimate. It might be higher. I doubt whether it's lower because we know what we spent thus far. but it projects what we might spend. So that could generate, if there's no further expenditure to train secretaries or clerks, that could add to what we would call the fund balance, which we all hope out of every budget is a big solid number, somewhere between 8 and 15%. Just as good management. So that's how we get fund balances. And we should hope that we probably don't spend any more than that.
Mr. Hill, I had a couple additional questions.
Yeah, go ahead, we'll get back to you.
Page 37, Mrs. Clark, supervisor, special ed, and gifted. How many people are we talking about?
There are 4 supervisors.
4 supervisors? That's total for special ed and gifted?
Yes,
Okay.
and that
on-
hasn't changed.
Okay, on page 84, it says assistant superintendent, but I don't see assistant superintendent on page 84. The worksheet here says page 84, but I don't see it on page 84.
Yeah, you're right.
Assistant superintendent is on page 89, Mr. Mosey.
Okay, with the curriculum supervisor. Okay. I had a question on page 89 as well. Count number 23035, supervisors. How many people are we talking about, please?
4 curriculum supervisors.
4. Okay. That's all I had, Mr. Hill. Thank you.
Mr.
Yes, go ahead. Sure.
In a earlier meeting that I had with Dennis, and I believe Pat, we were there, we went over with Dennis on page 89, the 2 executive director positions. We see one, well, both of them for this year were budgeted out of these 2 sequential line items, 23041 and 23042. However, for next year, we see only a portion of one being funded through this line item. Where's the rest?
I can answer that. You're talking about that 73,000.
Yeah, remember we had asked him to combine
That
it?
is part of Mr. Weir's salary, and the other,
So where's the rest?
the other money would be under community ed, I believe, isn't it, Mr. Weir?
Page 68.
That's correct.
Board secretary.
Board secretary, right.
25%.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, Don,
Go
one
ahead.
more. On that same page, bottom one, Director of Planning and Staff Development. We're gonna fund that next year off this line item. Where do we fund it this year?
Mr. Kelly.
I would find that for you. We had a different ASN for it last year.
Thank you, Don.
I believe it was in the 1400s last year.
I think all of long-range planning
Is
was
that
grouped
correct?
together. I think all of long-range planning was grouped together in the 14.
Yeah, it was placed under a funded,
separate-
yeah,
Separate line item.
Yes.
it's funded account, so I never quite understood what it was.
Yeah, I know,
We didn't
but
really
would you-
have state
where is it?
reimbursement, but they put it under a Goals 2000
No.
type designation.
Would you get that information
Not
to,
2000 itself, but it's not
If
funded.
you find it tonight, fine.
Oh, here it is.
Federally
You found it?
funded
It's on
program.
page 29,
No.
second line item. 14030. Okay, thank you.
Any other board questions under this item?
But that category of 1400 is federally funded. Yes. Yes. Again, we're showing these
Where you at?
irrational increases. 94, page 94. Something like this, I guess I need to, just if there's gonna be new services, that's fine, just let everyone realize that. You have the dental exams that are more than doubling. They also had almost quadrupled last year over the year before. What causes something like this, Judy? When you go from like $963, then it grows to $3,900, and then it becomes $8,818.
Vicki, I'll give you a whole breakdown. I'll
No,
give you a whole breakdown. I'll have it prepared for
No,
the
no.
next meeting. We have all that. I can't explain it to you right now. I don't have the numbers of
I
students.
just wondered if we had to
It's-
take on non-publics,
No,
or
it's-
if there's some change.
Well, non-publics are included.
I knew we've had them, but
Yeah.
if there were something more than a normal.
No, it's numbers of students that will sign up to have it done in school, and there's reimbursement from the state for that too. If you look at what the nursing allocation is that comes back, we file a state report and we put the numbers down of children that had it, and there is a reimbursement back for that. But we have, I can give you background from 7 years ago, how many kids participate.
No, when it was just doubling, I wondered if there was some expanded service, or if we
No.
were changing the number of years, because I know there's a rotation, a
It's the
cycle
same-
for
It's
it,
the same as it's been for the past 10 years.
and it's just causing an increase. Don, before you go on to transportation or anyone, we've worked with this administration area. We do have to visit board services. If you recall, we jumped from the board's account in the last meeting, and we said we would have to back up for the board's account
services?
itself, yes.
Board
It's
services.
not really administrative or anything, but we certainly should scrutinize our own account too.
All right, so we've done with this. What about board services? Does somebody help me?
Yeah, I have a problem with that,
What
but I don't know
page-
where it is.
What page are we on?
Page 68.
That's not on the agenda, right?
No, this is
No, it's
something
not
that
on the
said.
agenda.
It was
No,
missed,
yeah, but it
it
said
was
it was
skipped.
on
Last week's agenda.
So there's nothing here. All right.
Does anybody have a question related to that? We're on
I'd like
page
to state my
68.
feelings regarding that, with the membership and dues, we've got our PSBA,
Where
which
is that?
grows. It'll be on page 70.
Top of page 70.
And $12,000 now. A portion of that is for the membership. I know that many of us have, do take the books that are sent, the magazines that are sent, but those are, they're available at a separate rate without necessarily requiring the full membership in that organization. Donna would want to be here for the discussion, but that's one area I want everyone to note that I'd like to see a consensus gathered one way or another prior to the adoption of the budget.
Vicki, can you look into finding out what the difference is in cost between the magazines and the part of
Sure,
your
well, you'll
finance?
see, we even
The
have on page
subscriptions are on
69, we have board subscriptions. There is a slight difference in the front as to whether you're a non-member or a member subscriber, but it really isn't anywhere near the $12,000 for those services. And I will tell you, Don, I think we've been involved in some recent litigation that had pending ramifications for school boards all across the state, and I haven't heard anything regarding PSBA coming in and giving assistance to help not only protect us, but to protect the integrity of school boards under their membership throughout this.
Can you pull together what
area.
all those numbers are?
Sure.
All right. Any other questions under board services?
Yes,
Yes.
Don, I have a question in regards to, under audits, at the top of page 69, we have $13,000 being budgeted for audits. Is the current work going on in the finance department being paid through this?
No, it's being paid through legal fees, legal services.
Okay, and what type of audits? Is that
It's
the,
family
That's
amount.
Federo.
is that
Annual-
Federo?
Annual
Yeah.
internal.
That's right.
Okay.
Mailing
And
factor.
this year, we budgeted $5,000 for ourselves to go to conferences.
Yeah, I
As you
went
can
that out
see,
too.
we all went to a whole bunch.
Better start your engines.
So it seems like the board is being held at a different level, that even though we didn't spend anything,
We took it out this
we
year.
took it out on us.
But it's
But
missing.
everybody else
It's
in this
gone.
place,
It's gone already, Sharice.
excuse me, I just want to finish what I'm saying.
Okay, I apologize.
Everybody else
I apologize.
gets a budgeted amount. Even if they don't spend it, they're still gonna budget it over and above what they spent. So it doesn't make any sense why.
They discriminate against us.
We're,
obviously.
this is true, because quite frankly, I'd like to go to a couple of conferences. There was a really good one that we could have gone to this year.
I have always been a supporter of.
Collectively.
I would, if you want my
And,
personal recommendation, I would put some of that money back in. Whether it be 5,000 or 2,500, I would say, put it back in. I don't know, what's the board's feeling? What do you feel about that?
Don't you think we could use a conference now and then?
I haven't had a chance to go to a conference this year.
I was gonna say, I'm too busy. Don't
I
bother.
have-
There
I've
are,
been
there
too
are
busy.
local ones, there are ones that they run that I know some of them are interested.
I think that if we ever get into a situation where we don't have such a heavy workload that it might be something the board could look at maybe going collectively.
Well, do you want to put
But I-
$2,500
I
in
would
it?
say we could maybe put some money back in, but, you know, that's not exactly the top of my list of priorities right now. Well, you know, I mean, I think we got more important things to worry about in this budget than the
Well, I agree with that.
conference.
We're talking about this
Yeah,
point. It's
Yeah,
not money. It's
you're
just a
right.
point of direction. If you
You're
want to
right.
put it in or
You're
don't want to
right.
put it in, I don't. Yeah, point in that, Bill?
If people want to go, they shouldn't have to pay for it themselves.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah.
I don't want to go. I don't have time to go, but if somebody wants to go and they think it's important,
You have any
the
feeling on
district
that,
should pay for it.
Dave?
I'm getting my receipts out tonight.
No kidding.
Vicky,
gonna say.
what do you,
No, I personally have always felt that we have boarded, we've been so busy. I haven't seen money pulled out of a conference account for a long time, and I really think if there was something pressing, the money's somewhere within the $112 million budget.
Right.
But,
is there anything
I
else? that-
personally do not advocate for it to be placed back in. I argued about it last year, and we didn't spend any
I'm
money.
sure the board wants to go someplace, we'll find the money. Is,
Right.
Besides that, you can't take more than 4 or else.
That's right.
is there anything
You'll
else
never
under
know
board
what will
services?
happen.
Yes,
No.
I'd
Yes,
like a
David.
slight refresher on what other services the PSBA offers. We talked about periodicals, that's not the only service. I should remember after all these years, but I don't, and if there's a short 1 or 2 page piece of information from the PSBA, I'd be curious what some of those other services are that we will not, as a district, be able to use if we do not resubscribe.
I think we should send that with the Friday afternoon mailing.
There is
I would
such a
appreciate it.
brochure.
One is the
We just-
insurance, I know that.
Yeah, we just got something from them that told us about how they're trying to lobby about the prevailing wage in Harrisburg, which obviously we can't do ourselves.
Is there any other questions under board services? Hearing none, we'll move ahead with Art Wood under
The rest of the meeting. I hope this
business
gets-
services.
I hope this gets easier.
I do too.
I don't think so.
Ours is pretty well defined as we go through it. I would direct your attention to the agenda and the material in your agenda, as well as page 102 of your yellow budget book, which will begin the business administration area. It's obvious that we have a position which is now vacant, listed at $87,487, which is the Director of Financial Services. A purchasing specialist salary is listed, that's one individual. You can see that we have a secretary to the Director of Financial Services, as well as 3 payroll specialists, as well as a 2 payroll specialists. A chief payroll specialist, a payroll specialist, and a benefits specialist, making up 3 payroll people, a bookkeeper and accounts payable person. And I guess before we go too much further, looking at the next sheet in your board packet, you will see that that's kind of a lean operation, and that is well documented in the fact that we rank in the county with the least amount spent in that area at $39.15 a student. Our closest competitor is Souderton, spending $60.43 per student. And I only say that because we've had discussion in the past as it relates to the need to add additional people in that department as we begin this review with our outside auditor. I would like to point out, under 25004, you will see we had budgeted $178,468. Our estimate will exceed that, and there are some situations whereby when you have a maternity leave, for an example, you continue to pay that person on the leave and you bring a new person in. We had that situation, and that would reflect in that additional expenditure, as well as some temps that we've had to bring in to get work out on time. An example of that would be W-2s and other things that become major projects and need to have additional help in that department. Most recently, with the cooperation of some of my colleagues, I've been taking people from other departments and helping out in the payroll, and especially at this time of the year in the accounts payable office. Joyce Hurst, as you know, is a very dedicated employee, works very hard at what she does, but there are times throughout the year, and now in particular, where you have to prepare 481 checks for officials for spring sports. You have to develop an ASN number as well as an object for each course reimbursement. So there are times where we have a balloon or a bulge that we have to deal with. Currently, we're dealing with that through the help of Mrs. Clark, who has given us some additional help when needed. So I need to tell you, as we look at that department, I don't know how proud it is to be a district that spends the least amount of money to manage their finances.
Excuse me.
Especially when, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, that chart was, the IU chart, it said district rank by function, and that function was expenditures.
In the 2500 function, which we're reviewing now.
Okay.
The total function. I have included tonight 3 charts, 25, 26, and 27. 25 being business administration. As we move through, down in the other categories, you will see our benefits, including retirement, and you will see that they reflect our projected costs for next year and show an increase, of course, in our medical insurance. Moving down to employee benefits in total, it's interesting to note that we're only increased by a slight amount for next year, and overall, we reflect the savings in retirement because of our new and reduced retirement rate for the next school year. And that is typical throughout the budget. If you look at, there's some additional small audits. There's the Federal Drug Act audit in the amount of $400. There's technical services in data processing in the amount of $3,000. And the total purchased technical services, of course, is $3,400. That's a minimal expenditure considering what we need to do. In the area of maintenance and repairs, 25,401, you see $3,200. That's service on the check writing machines, the signatory machines, and other things, the burster that we use in the business office. Rental of equipment would be any rental as it relates to check signing equipment that we have in that office that we don't necessarily purchase. So total purchase property reflects an increase of $800 for next year, going from $3,500 to $4,300. Postage in the business office, once again, this is the topic that you attempted to address a while ago as it relates to taking money and distributing it throughout other categories. There is a page, and I forget the page number, where you'll see each school has postage assigned to them, and some of that has been redirected instead of charging everything to the business office. Advertising, of course, the $10,000 that you see, that's for all our legal advertising as it relates to bid documents, as it relates to advertising for meetings, as it relates when you do some minor advertising for all our bids, and it's actually 2 or 3 consecutive weeks in 2 newspapers. So that's covered in the $10,000. Printing services, of course, material that we need to have printed, checks that we need to have printed for the business office. Mileage is very insignificant. So other purchase services in the 500 object come to a total of $22,175 with a major reduction compared to last year of $35,675, but that's reflected primarily in the postage reduction. Books that we subscribe to, periodicals and books, which are very important to payroll and to other functions. Kevin subscribes to Consumer Guide and things like that help him as a purchasing agent. That's $950. Our supply total, of course, is $1,609.50. New equipment, $3,800. You notice that I'm talking about a document imaging system. I need to tell you that currently, and it's a very antiquated method, currently we are using a microfiche camera, and we are paying someone $2,700 a year to put on microfiche our payroll distribution, which would be your check stubs, payroll history, retirement, W-2, and so forth. We are proposing that we go to an electronic imaging system, which would be helpful for many different documents. We would keep our information in the existing VAX, and of course, at the end of the year, we would just produce what we need as far as a compact disc, and it would give us much greater flexibility with that unit. Once you make the initial expenditure, we recognize that thereafter it will cost approximately $1,000 a year with or $1,100 a year, which will give us a savings of some $2,700 each year thereafter. So we think that this is moving us into the 1980s, and that's kind of important in that office.
You mean the 90s, right?
No,
you
you
meant
meant
the
the
80s. You said that purposely. So far behind you.
Funny
So
art.
we're comfortable with the budget overall. If you look at budget year to budget year budget, you will see that that last year we budgeted $64,078. For this year, we're budgeting $59,976.
Any questions?
Yes, I had one. Page 103. Unemployment business office, workers' comp business office, salary continuation business office. I guess that's all been moved, right?
Suspense
So
accounts.
it's a suspense account that Dennis didn't redistribute. He did say at the last board meeting, if you recall, Art, or not the very last one, the one before, we asked about those suspense accounts being redistributed.
You asked to have those redistributed.
And he said he would.
That's right.
And yet I got the new budget, and when I looked through, the salaries are still offset in one set category. The union salaries aren't actually been evened out to their actual expected dollars by department. So we have special ed is at the old contract rate, while all the money that was backed out under regular ed. I mean, now that we're on it, that's a real frustration for me.
Let Pat finish his
But,
So
question.
that's all I had.
But that's a suspense account.
Sharice, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, the vacant director of financial services. In the corporate world, an MBA, 20-year job experience, in a financial managerial position, directorship position, doesn't make anywhere near the salary. I'd like this board to begin the process of establishing this salary. I could support a reduction in this salary to around somewhere between $70,000 and $75,000, and I'd like the rest of the board to consider doing that and beginning the process of taking a look at our administrative salaries with this particular position in the upcoming year. Also, under supplies, Art,
Yes.
2,500, 25601, you have $16,000 that we spend a year out of there. Page 104. No, under supplies. I'm assuming that that also includes maintenance and maybe copy paper?
It includes copy paper, includes
Okay.
all the supplies for that office. And as a matter of fact, we may have some of our basic check supplies in there too.
Okay, well, it's my understanding that,
I mean, just printing, to give you an idea, when you're using an NCR type 4 or 5 part purchase order, and you recognize that we're now beginning to approach, which is a humongous jump. We went from about 6,000 purchase orders last year to 9,000 this year. And the cost of just, Ken would probably know the cost, because I think he has planned regularly for that printing, but the cost of purchase orders alone is not a small item.
okay. However, I was going more along the lines of Xerox. It's my understanding that we don't have any type of maintenance agreement or any type of, and that we're buying Xerox paper directly from Xerox?
We are no longer
No.
doing that. We stopped that process.
Okay, so then, wouldn't that go down then? Wouldn't your costs go
No,
down?
we've been doing that for about a year and a half or 2 years. We stopped using Xerox brand paper. We ran a test. I encouraged a local vendor to bring us in some samples, and we have been using that paper ever since.
Okay, so that, so
Should-
do we
we'll
have a maintenance agreement with Xerox on our copiers in the district?
We have, yes, we have lots of maintenance agreements on our copiers, and we're in the process of pulling that whole picture together.
Okay, great, I'd like to.
If I can interject, Mrs. Krieger, Mr. Wood and I have been talking for the past couple of months, and we're going to look very hard at going out possibly for bid with other copying companies.
Okay.
Not to say that we won't continue to use Xerox, but just to see what's out there in the market.
Okay, I appreciate that. And also under new equipment, you budgeted $3,000 for this year, but you spent nothing. So don't you only need $800 for next year?
No, because the 3,000 becomes a fund balance, and we need the full 38. In other words, the only way we could do that, and I'm not...
But you didn't spend it this year.
Well, I understand that, and we have no intention of buying this new piece of equipment unless you direct us to, out of the 3,000 and find the 800 somewhere else. We would rather take our time beginning in June to solicit sealed quotations, have some demonstrations on the equipment from a number of different manufacturers, make our purchase with next year's funds out of the 3,800. It's as broad as it is long.
Sharice, when the 96, 97 budget is over, it's closed. You can't, there's no
Right.
funds.
It doesn't stay, the money doesn't stay on that line
Doesn't go
item.
to- it goes
It
into
then
the fund
becomes under
balance.
your beginning balance, and you have to redesignate your spending levels.
So then it would go into the,
3,000 gets carried over as a leftover balance
fund
into the
it.
beginning of your year, and then you draw down expenses. It becomes a revenue, and you have to show both your revenues as well as your expenditures in the budget. It can't be just assumed that stays there. We've got the 3,000, and then somehow if we just add 400, we automatically have 3,400 in that following year budget. It doesn't work that way. We'll go through it later.
well, I mean, my point is though, I mean, didn't we tax people so that we could buy that, or did we have that money in that account last year?
Yeah, but the taxes are still recurring. That's not necessarily, if it's the same amount of money, you're not
Okay.
necessarily levying a tax on that.
Right.
We're adding $7.5 million in spending here, and we're not levying $7.5 million in a tax mill hike.
Not this year.
Not this year anyway, but I'm
Okay.
just saying, it's,
Bill, do you have a question?
No.
Hey,
Art, I think you answered the question. The cost for the document imaging system at this point is a placeholder based on some estimates. You haven't selected a system at this point in time?
We've had a quotation, and I based the actual budget number on some quotations, but we haven't selected the system.
Okay, have you put together at least some specifications of what you'd like the
Only some
system?
preliminary discussion between Kevin and Lou and our people that use that system regularly.
Okay.
But we will do it. I mean, we'll do it first class. We'll get some people in to show us what we can do.
All right, thank you.
Vicki?
only to say regarding the Director of Finance salary allocation, I do believe it may be possible that we find a highly qualified individual to serve as, for our head business executive. But I'd also like you to keep in mind that ever since December of '95, I've acknowledged that the finance department was understaffed in accounting areas. I'm not talking those with general accounting processes, the clerical staff that's there, but I think that even 6 months ago or a year ago, there was a question asked, if something happens to Dennis, then what? Well, we're dealing with this. We're dealing with this situation, and I give a lot of credit to Art and to Dr. Bose and to those that have come in to assist this district. But it certainly isn't an ideal situation that when you have someone that's out sick or out on an extended vacation or what have you, and that business still has to operate, that you don't have someone of the experience level that can really fill in and knows the operation completely through and through. I mean, we've had to rely on Art for this at this point in time for the day-to-day operations. So while I'll agree with you, Sharice, regarding the salary for that one person, I think we need to face facts that you just need more manpower at the level of at least not only at the CPA or MBA level, but also someone underneath that has still a strong accounting background, perhaps.
I'm glad you
not
said
strong.
manpower.
Pardon me?
I'm glad you said manpower and not people power.
Oh, yeah.
People
Thank
power.
goodness. People power.
All right.
Thank you.
I think we've covered this subject. You want to go ahead to your next one, the plant operations facility?
Sure. Following along in your agenda packet, and I've given you some better defined descriptions as we move into some of the objects, but before we do, we'll touch on staffing since it's at the very beginning. And if you look in the board packet tonight, you will look at back under the 2600s. I have a proposed plant operations department staffing. If you recall last year when we came before the board and we talked about upgrading our staff since it was reduced throughout the construction process, and we went, of course, from 102 full-time and 13 part-time to 105 full-time and 14 part-time. That is our projected staffing for next year. So there are no changes in staffing, and I think it's important to know that. All of our salaries reflect a 2% increase as directed by the board, and of course, the corresponding benefits reflect increased costs. If you look at 26202, you see our medical increased costs, and you also notice that as of last year, we backed our workers' comp, unemployment, and so forth out of our category, the 26211 and the 22610. I need to share with you, and we missed the opportunity this year, we certainly won't next year. Mr. Starkey's organization brought to us a proposal that if we establish an in-house safety committee, we can recognize a savings on our workers' comp. I've already started that process. I'm working with Dr. Miller. John Strobel will be our safety coordinator. We need to hold some regular meetings, but it's a sizable savings. It will save us 5% of our total premium, which is going to save us probably some $15,000. We could have recognized $10,000 this year, but unfortunately we didn't take advantage of it. For next year, I can assure you we will, and we will reflect that savings. Many districts, and just so you know, and it's an interesting concept, the money they save by creating a safety committee, they put toward the expenditures that they share with all of their employee groups in promoting a wellness day or a wellness activity. So we may want to talk about that at a later date, that even though we're going to save $15,000 in premium, we may want to put some of that toward a wellness committee or a wellness day that will help us overall as it relates to our fringe benefits. Moving ahead and taking the sheet you have, if you look at object 340 technical services, I'm showing you some examples of what expenditures we have in that category. We have gone budget year to budget year at the same budgeted amount. When you move to 411 disposal service, we did a consortium bid for the IU, and these numbers do not reflect our actual bid because we have other needs for roll-offs and other pickups throughout the year. But I can tell you this year, we're paying $66,000 in the third year of a bid, whereas I will bring to you for the May meeting an award for a new 3-year contract that is locked in at $58,000 for the 3 years. We'll be leaving Mascara and going to waste management. We've had waste management in Indian Valley in the past with good success. I can only tell you that even though it's a $58,000 budget item, the additional $12,000 is reflected in the use of roll-off containers, specialized things when we're ripping out and doing some demolition or construction. So that's what reflects in that particular area. Snow removal, each year we place $10,000 in snow removal. Fortunately for you and for us, as a department, we did not expend money this year in snow removal. We budgeted 10, it will be part of your fund balance. We've budgeted 10 again for next year. I would only remind you that we could have winter again someday. And last year, we spent $29,249.10, where I had budgeted $10,000. So we had a charmed life this year, and we're happy for it. Utilities, natural gas. Our natural gas here is not related to energy or heat. It's related to cooking, emergency generators, domestic hot water, and every time we fire our boiler, we, in most cases, have gas ignition. That remains pretty much stable. Electricity, we are counting on somewhat of a reduction by our friends at PECO. I've spelled out for you on that page the providers we have in our various buildings. PP&L at Hatfield, Oak Park, Penfield, the PECO people, and of course Lansdale Borough. We're showing a decrease in that function.
When you can select your own.
We're ready to, we're hoping that since we're only a mile from PP&L with the high school, that we'll take that $600,000 bill and, or $578,000 and reduce it by going to PP&L. Bottled gas, this makes us a bit nervous. If any of you have followed propane costs, I hope that my number, I'm running a slight increase, but we have to be concerned about bottled gas. Bottled gas got a little bit pricey this year. If you look at our water usage, they are known water increases or rate increases that we'll be dealing with. I share with you for your perusal which buildings are covered with North Penn Water Authority, which buildings are covered by North Wales Water Authority. As you begin to look at sewerage, we've had this discussion in the past. At Gwynnor and Pembroke, those rates certainly jump out at you. That's based on the population of the building times a per person cost, and they're both part of the Upper Gwynedd North Wales Sewer Authority, and that's the rate. I mean, we can't change it. Gwynedd Square, for an example, is $1,850. For a smaller building at Gwynnor with $10,725. But I list for you the various sewer authorities that provide our services in that area. Moving on to a very important category, and a category that we always worry about our expenditures in this category because every year our buildings get older. And interestingly enough, I've increased this category somewhat because up until this coming year, Bridle Path and Walton are still under warranty, and Penndale is under warranty. Now, Bridle and Walton drop off of being under warranty, so anything that we have to repair and maintain, we pick up on. I just give you a list of items that we use there. Some of them, of course, water softener repairs are ongoing and very important to us. Automatic temperature controls are our thermostats and all our systems that control our heat and cooling where we have it. Yearly preventive maintenance contracts, I'll be coming to you shortly with some quotes that we're getting. We quote those for 3 years, and they would be on our chillers, our main chillers, and that's a very important service. So you can see glass replacement, fence repairs ongoing, elevator repairs, a very constant thing. And these are just the general things that we need to do to keep our facilities running. Rental of equipment, this is equipment that we don't necessarily invest in. Sometimes we can borrow it. We have a very kind person in our community who gives us a key to his place of business, and we can kind of go pick up what we want, but there are days that he wants to use his 2 compressors and we want to use one also. So we have to go and rent one. But that gives you an idea on the rent in the area of rental. Extermination, we will be opening quotes in the next couple of days for a new 3-year IPM contract. There's been a lot of interest, and we're hoping that we stay at about the same cost for our extermination service. Other purchased property, the elevator inspections by Labor and Industry, underground tank registrations, pressure vessel registration, boiler inspections, and the indemnification fund. If you recall, and you can see a drastic decrease there, some $20,000. Since we've replaced all of our tanks with the exception of Hatfield, Nash, and North Wales, we are no longer, since we have spill control and spill protection, we're no longer required to have the indemnification. Telephone services going up, and you can see as we begin to add telephone lines, as we have heavier usage with modems connecting buildings, point of sale and that type of thing, we have a slight increase in telephone service. Moving beyond that, supplies is always a large item. And supplies probably would include 100 different items if I would list them all. I've given you some major ones. Needless to say, we use a lot of lamps and fluorescent tubes and that type of thing just to keep our buildings lit. Fillers, we are firm believers, and we think it's one of the things that helps us with indoor air quality, and that is we regularly change fillers. It's a lot cheaper not to change fillers. We insist on regular filler change. So you look at that list of items, field marking paint, that has just increased tremendously with what we're doing with the middle school or the junior high middle school program, athletic programs. We're now lining more fields than you want to think about, plus in the spring 3 cinder track. So that gives you an idea as it relates to general supplies for the department. Object 621 is gas energy. That's where we heat. We heat the kindergarten building at York Avenue with gas, and we heat the bus garage with gas. So that's pretty stable. And of course is always determined by the degree days. We had a rather mild winter. Number 2, fuel oil. We're waiting for a bid to come in so that we can readjust the budget number. I have allowed for a sizable increase per gallon. We're hoping that things will be right. We've all watched our own heating oil at home increase in cost, and we're hoping that maybe we'll get good bids as part of the consortium and be able to bring that more back in line with the $345,450. Overall, looking at budget year to budget year, we're looking at about a 2.3% budget increase, and when you consider that 2% of that is for salaries, we're pretty proud of what we've done. I would direct your attention once again to the IU statistical study, and we're very proud that we can maintain our buildings at the standard we maintain them at and rank 21 in expenditures out of 21 districts. And when you look at that, it's $614.20 compared to the most expensive at $1,296. And we all get to visit other buildings, and I think that's a tribute to the people that work for us in that department. Questions? Pat?
Just one. Are the 610 departmental supplies?
Yes, sir.
We haven't put in any new buildings on since last year. What would cause that to rise $12,000?
That's a 3% increase, and you know, because you're a person that's out there buying custodial supplies and materials, we would only hope that our costs will only go up 3%. We find that typically those materials are increasing about 5%
You're
a
not
year.
buying any more, you're just figuring that they're going to raise their
Allowing
prices.
for the inflation.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Sharice?
Art, on the disposal service, are we contractually bound to participate with the IU for disposal services?
We're not, but you know, interestingly enough, in talking to the providers, unlike some IU bids, we're very conscious of the fact that we carry many small districts when we combine diesel fuel, gasoline, fuel oil. We take the volume up so high that we help the smaller district. Trash is trash. I mean, they're going to bid it that way because there are a lot of different vendors bidding. We can have Waste Management Indian Valley, Souderton may have Mascaro, somebody else may have another BFI. So in that case, it really doesn't, I mean, we couldn't do better on our own, but we're doing as well as we can do in this particular bid.
I don't know, I have a preference for the company, you know, that I deal with personally, because of the personal service that we receive in this area. and it just happens to be a company that you mentioned, that we're going to, I'd like to, stay with them. I don't want to
We're
have
locked
to
in
be
for 3
bound to
years.
change every 3 years.
We're locked into 3 years. We
Because
write,
at the height of competition, disposal services are not unlike any other services. They'll promise you the moon, and then when you come in, the service is somewhat different. And I believe that the disposal service that we've had for the last 3 years, and I don't want to mention any names right now, wasn't as good as when we had waste management before. I'm glad to see that we're going back to waste management. My point is, I would like to stay with them, and I would like us to,
can't guarantee that.
pardon?
We can't guarantee that at the end of these 3 years, they'll be low bid again. In fact, there's some conversation out there.
I know, but we're one of the largest districts that they will be servicing.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that if we deal with them specifically at the end of 3 years because of our size, they'll negotiate with us, Art. I know that. I know that.
Okay, we'll go to bid.
I absolutely know that.
We had waste management for a number of years, from 1980 until about 1993.
Right.
They lost the bid. They weren't competitive.
Through the IU.
Doesn't matter IU. I mean, I talk to these people every day. These people are good because we make them good. We make them change the cans, we make them come in July, take them out, steam clean them, repaint them, bring us new cans, we won't put up with dented lids. I mean, we're mean. As far as.
That's fine, for the
and
kind
we
of
have-
money they're getting to dump our trash, I mean, it's not,
Yeah, but think of
it's
the
not
number of
cheap.
containers. Think of the number of containers.
But tipping fees constantly go up too, and I understand all the logistics with that, but my point is, if you have a good company,
Stay with it. We
you
would hope
stay
that.
with them and you can still go out for bid, but you can also still, try to extend a continuation of your relationship with them through
Under the
personal
law,
negotiations.
unfortunately, under the law, we can't.
Yeah.
We need to bid that at the end of 3 years. We can't just sit
Well, that
here.
was my original question. Are we bound to have to bid this out every 3 years through the IU process?
Or on our
On
own,
our own.
but we're bound to bid.
Okay, all right, that's
Bound
fine. I don't have a problem going out for bidding it
And I hear
every
where
3
you're coming
years.
from, and
Okay.
we're pleased too.
But I just don't like to be saddled with the IU's decision for ourselves, because we
It's
might
not
not
the-
like the hauler.
It's not the IU's decision. Let me tell you, the day the bids were open, it's not their decision. It's your decision. At the May board meeting, you will award the contract to Waste Management based on the IU bid. The day after the bid, I called and said, would it be to our benefit not to participate, reject the bid through the IU and bid it ourselves? He said, Archie, try to get a higher price.
right.
So I have to recommend you that we go through the IU.
Okay, also, under departmental supplies, it's my understanding that the district does not provide Kleenex or tissues.
I thought through the nurses department, we do.
I was told, and Art, I've been donating boxes of Kleenex for 5 years now,
To the classroom?
every classroom, and.
We've never provided it
I
to
even
the
had to go
classroom.
on a hunt one night in here for Kleenex.
Last year
We've
was
never provided it
very
to
nice
classroom.
to clean it.
Well, personally, I think there should be some kind of a, I don't know, I'm just looking at prevention, okay? And Kleenex, or it doesn't have to be Kleenex, but it seems to me that tissues would be something that the district would
I will
readily
certainly get a price and get
provide
back to
to
you.
students and our
Arthur, it's on the
employees.
bid
For nurses, for health suites.
for health
only.
suite
But
services.
I think Sharice is
She's now
alluding
talking
to
for
I'm
every
talking
classroom.
about health suite
She's
services,
talking
I'm
about
talking
every
about the
classroom.
classrooms, the ESC, principals' offices. You can't find a Kleenex in anybody's office in this district, and I think it's
One in my
ridiculous.
office.
That's because you brought it in. That's my point. Well,
I mean, I can certainly give you a price. I think you'd be amazed to see what the additional cost. I mean,
Nothing to sneeze at, Art.
yes, it is.
It won't be anything to sneeze at.
I didn't get the price. Anything else, Bruce?
I'm just trying to make a point. I think
I
it's
can't figure
ridiculous
out
we
what
don't
she's
provide
talking about.
Kleenex. Also, on the Gwynnor replacement tractor with a snow blower for $17,650.
Yep.
I think I'd like to see that go out to bid.
Oh, it does. It has to. In fact, the price I've used here is the state contract price. And that seems like an awful lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but let me tell you
No
what.
kidding, I mean, what
Well, let me-
size is that?
Let me tell you what I bought, what we bought. We have bought and it's a corny kind of saying that nothing runs like a deer. We have standardized on John Deere. They run and run and run with no
What a
maintenance.
commercial.
This is a unit that has a 5-foot mower deck on the front of it. It has a 42-inch snow blower. If you look at the Gwynnor property, we're not only doing a sidewalk out front, sidewalk into the building, we have the road that goes out the back of the building, we do that sidewalk, we do a sidewalk all the way across the property to the connecting neighborhood, and you really need to have, we have put this equipment in a number of buildings. Some board members, I think Pat, have watched it in operation. It's the only way we can clear our sidewalks. It's a 2-stage snow blower, 42 inches wide, and it just takes care of everything.
Sounds like a
Fortunately,
monster.
we have a trailer, we trail them from building to building, we don't have enough of them. And this is an attempt to get rid of a 1976 tractor that's beyond repair and bring something in that will do the problem.
If I can interject, Sharice, it really, it jumped out at me when we had our initial meeting, but when you get into equipment and the schools we have, and Art does moving around from school to school, if we get any kind of snow and that thing is moving, 4 or 5 schools during the course of a day, you better have something that's going to hold up. Because
Yeah,
my
this is just-
son has a truck and he plows when it snows. And I must tell you, after a couple of days, that thing's usually in his shop because, he ends up burning something out.
This one's not moving from school.
Yes,
Oh,
This
yes,
for
it is.
Gwynnor.
No, it's going to be
We'll
housing.
take it right across the street and do the property. If you look at Penn Brook,
Penn Brook's
they
right
do not
across
have
the
a
street.
snow blower. They have a sidewalk that starts up at the Norgwin baseball field,
Yeah, I know where.
goes
that
down to the borough of North Wales.
is. Okay.
So, I mean, we share and trail building to building.
And my last question in this area has to do with that replacement tank in Hatfield. I
Yep.
thought we did that this year.
No, we did not.
We did something.
If you folks recall, no, we have in the budget the replacement of a cooling tower overflow tank that we have not done. It's at about $4,500.
No, there was an underground tank in Hatfield that this board was asked to take action on to replace it this year.
I take exception. I can show you, I mean, look at last year's budget. It's not there. We had this in the bond issue.
Because our
at
bond
one
money,
time,
that's what I was
and
gonna
you folks
say.
came back
I think
and
it was
said,
a bond account.
we need to start paying for this as we go. We have 3 tanks
Okay,
left. and
that's, all right.
Okay.
I
that's
just
what it
wanted
is.
to be reminded, because I knew we did something with this particular underground tank. I wanted somebody just to refresh my memory.
We're fortunate in light of the fact that we have
So we're paying
remediated
for
every
this.
building except North Wales, Hatfield, and Nash, and that has to be done by 1999. So I'm proposing that we budget for these 2 things.
Okay, that's fine.
Bill, you have any
That's fine.
questions?
No questions.
Dave?
Art, I don't know if you can answer this question, but do you have any idea why the finance department doesn't break out telephone service through the buildings, as we do with electric, gas, oil,
I do
everything
not
else?
know that. I mean, we have a good handle now on what service we have in each building. We review the bills for abuse in each building, but we don't, I mean, that's easily done under that general category of 200 or 185,000 for this year. I could in fact tell you the bill for each building. But
Okay.
I've just never broken it out. It's kind of been a thing.
Well,
that-
I wasn't wondering why you didn't break it out. I'm wondering why, with all the other services broken out by building, telephones lumped together. It was,
Telephone was always handled by the finance department and not by facilities.
okay.
But it's in our facilities budget.
Maintenance on the various telephone systems that we have,
Do it in-
where does
we're
that
very-
get covered?
We're very fortunate, and it was probably one of the best things we ever did. We have a young man on staff that does PA, intercom, fire alarm, all of our telephone, in-house telephone system. We install our own, today we were pulling cable in this building. And that savings, quite frankly, has to be, I had done for the board a number of years ago, probably saves the district $250,000.
I was just going to say, Art, I think as soon as you started your answer, that must have been the 3rd year in a row I've asked you that question, and the answer always rings a bell after you start. I'll have to try to remember that for another time. And finally, some ideas on the budget for district paving, where those things might go. Is that maintenance of just driveways?
We never know, Dave. Quite frankly, one of the things that happens to us, if we have a tough winter and a deep freeze, We don't know where most of that money is going until next March, when the potholes appear. Now, there are...
But it is maintenance, it's not individual projects.
It's maintenance. Every now and then we have to repave a long jump runway. We have to do a walkway. Right now, as we speak, we're connecting the Ravenwood development on Summity Town, Greenwich Square. So we bid it as a unit so that anytime throughout the year, and we have various bids, pothole repairs, walkways, overpaving, we can just bring Culp in and say, he's been low every year for the last 15, and say, this is what we need to do.
Thank you very much.
Vicki?
No, Ward, thank you very much for your thorough report.
Okay, you can move right into transportation.
Okay.
Switch gears, Art.
Is this the Art Wood show tonight?
Switch gears.
Let's go to 2700. I have my friend and colleague, John Cotran, here. We have worked very, very hard putting this budget together. There are a few things I need to share with the board. Probably, I prepared this sheet, but before we get into the process of transportation, I think it's helpful if you look so that you can put in perspective what we're all about. I mean, I don't even know that we're a mini SEPTA anymore. I think we're kind of a SEPTA. If you look at how many people we're transporting, we talk about 10,973 public school youngsters for a total of 915,000 miles next year. We're talking about 2,555 non-public that will approach 800,000 miles. So that really helps you understand the kind of transportation service we run. You need to know, and I'll get into it when we get into capital expenditures. I can't help but to remind you of today. We had 9 middle school sports runs this afternoon with 7 available buses. I mean, John is just pulling off some miracles. We knew when we instituted the middle school athletic program it was going to be a complicated transportation problem. I need to warn you in advance for next year that when we take away 288 parking spots at the high school for 1 year, we're going to have some unusual transportation requests. The kids have already approached us. They're saying we need more activity buses. If we can't drive, you need to get us home. We have a situation, for an example, with 9th graders competing in athletics, that we're picking them up at Brookfield Dale, taking them to Walton Farm, for an example, for soccer, taking the high school kids from the high school to Walton Farm. I mean, our transportation, and it's a tribute to the people that put the runs together. I say that, and I think it's important that you understand what we're all about. And one of the things that Dr. Miller projected is we don't know our staffing. We never know our staffing until we have our routes established. But I can assure you that we have not been able to figure out how to move a bus without a driver. So if we're running 105 buses on a given day, we're using 105 drivers. Looking at the overall cost for student transportation, the salaries reflected here indicate a 2% increase. Now that's skewed a bit when you look at the driver's salary. And I need to explain what we're doing. We're taking more and more runs that used to go in the IU budget, and if you go down to the IU part of the budget, you will see that we budgeted $325,000 this year, and we've reduced that to $100,000 next year. And we're showing our estimated to be $115,000. The difference is reflected in next year's driver's salary. We're pulling these routes back in-house, and that we find we can do it more effectively, we can do it less expensively. We started the year, I think, with 31 IU buses, John?
31 students.
31 students. How many are we busing now?
9.
9 students. So we're pulling that back, and I don't want you to think that we've all of a sudden established a new driver rate, and that's why this budget reflects the increase that it reflects. 300 series benefits, of course, the 200 series, that's an increase. That's reflected by our actual costs, and that's in direct relationship to the increase in salaries. And that's why our benefits go from $681,000 to $800,000. When you look at employee physicals, that's an important part of a requirement to have your CDL license. That's reflected in the 5,000. Technical service for vehicles, there's some very special things. We're reducing that considerably for next year. Purchase property services, that is increasing actually from 36.5 to 39.1. But I need to tell you, and we're all aware of it, we have not replaced vehicles for a number of years. And as things get older, repairs and vehicle maintenance costs will increase. And I think that's reflected in that overall increase. If you look at our contracted carriers, under the $210,000 that we have budgeted, that is a lot of individual usage. As I say in my introductory remarks, that deals with cabs, special services, parents, and independent carriers in general. And you sit here many nights and award contracts to those individuals. IU transportation, we're reducing from $325,000 to $100,000. Our insurance has dropped somewhat. You know what our safe driving record is. It's been an outstanding record. We have been, if you recall, we had received the award last year, and that's reflected, of course, in our decreased premium for next year. In-service training, which is something we do on a regular basis. That could be anything from CPR to any kind of training we do as it relates to safety. Mileage for the department. Data processing cost. If you recall, and this was always a very delicate issue, and John, we both got together and we began our negotiations with Edulog. We have an Edulog system, and since we have the young man on staff that knows the system inside out and backwards, it has treated us very well. But better yet, Edulog has treated us well when we did some hardball negotiations. And you can see 94-95, we spent $38,000, 95-96, $23,000. We dropped that to $12,750. We are projecting that will go to $15,850 for next year. And that involves a lot of software upgrades and things that they provide us with for that cost. We're very happy with Edulog. If you recall, a couple of years ago, we were going to throw it out. It's serving us well now. The rider contract, and I'd like to direct your attention to what we've done with the rider contract. If you go to the page behind your budget page, and it's probably an appropriate time to talk about riders. One of the things we know with any contracted service, and it's very important to us, is that when you have satisfied customers, something is happening that we can be proud of. I can tell you that, I don't know, John, how many calls a month do you have from non-public users?
Currently 3 or 4.
3 or 4 calls a month. That's unheard of. That's unheard of. When you think that we're transporting people to such a distance, and children typically are on buses longer. Ryder has employed all of the employees that left us typically. Their key people are people that worked for us. Dr. Mendravo is no longer with them. A person that used to work for us is now running the operation. We had a proposal. We're finishing the third year of a 3-year contract. And I guess this goes back to what we talked about earlier, Mrs. Krieger. We have the right, quite frankly, under this contract to extend for a 4th and 5th year. We weren't very happy with the rate of the extension. We started some really tough negotiations, and I need to tell you, we're very proud to tell you that for 97-98 and 98-99, we have increased our rider costs by 2.48%. And when you think about that, it's a marvelous opportunity for us to continue that contract. I would like to come back to you at the May meeting and recommend that we extend the contract for the 4th and 5th year, modify the contract, which I would have Mr. Bartle review, because it won't be the contract that we have. It'll be the Wood-Cotran contract. We were also able to, and if you recall, we kind of hoodwinked Ryder, and I can say this publicly because they know it, on the lease of 4 brand-new buses. If we were to lease 4 new buses, well, to give you an idea, when we were faced with the Penndale dilemma, and we had to bus the youngsters that were on hazardous routes, we wound up paying a rate that would be equal to $60,000 a year for 4 used buses. We have 4 brand-new buses that include full maintenance. Ryder said, we made a horrible mistake, we'll never do it again. I said, we won't extend the 4th and 5th year unless you give us the buses, and they're extended at 2.48%. So they're included in the package. We have a facility rental. They came to town, and they took a facility that was a disposal company facility that needed lots and lots of work. We helped them with the cost and it's been escalating. It's now at $60,549. We've helped them upgrade the facility. And the question usually comes up, and Mr. Mosey asked it, and Mr. Allen asked it, and I think it's important, and that is, how come if we're now sharing that facility with CB, why aren't they paying the facility cost? Let me tell you the difference. We have negotiated the facility cost down $20,000 for next year, $10,000 for the following year. But in the case, and I've done some research for you just so you have a comfort level, and I want you to look at regular runs for 97, 98 at $162.39 per day per bus, all inclusive. Cheltenham is paying Laidlaw $202 per day, same service. Norristown is paying Romano $185 a day, same service. Central Bucks is paying $167.88 next year, and also providing fuel. We sell the fuel at our cost to transport our non-public youngsters to Ryder. They pay for the fuel. In the Lebanon-Lancaster area, there are a lot of contractors working in that area where you have a cheaper labor rate. They're running anywhere from $165 to $200 a day. Lower Moreland, Laidlaw, $180 a day. So I think we can be proud of our new proposed extension. I think we have a good rate, we have a good service, it's working, and if it ain't broke, I'm saying let's not fix it. Moving along, and going back to the rest of our budget, and that was to highlight where we are with our Ryder transportation contract, which, by the way, we're showing as a decreased cost. One of the things that the board was concerned about, and rightly so, every year we used to run over in that contract. And that was because the contract originally was written for 49 runs. We can't do it with 49 runs. We have 51 and a half runs, plus the midday runs. Plus, if you recall, we have given them all of our summer work with our students through Mrs. Clark's department, early intervention, and a continuation of the regular school year. So that is included in that total package. Vehicle leases, that reflects the Ryder leases at $29,105, which will be 4 one-year-old buses now. We got them, we didn't get them really until January. They're housed at the Ryder compound, by the way. Our drivers report there and drive them. Supplies, as you can see, office and uniforms, general supplies, parts, tires, etc. That would be all of our fillers, that's our oil, that's our transmission fluid. It's everything it takes to keep the fleet moving. And quite frankly, we held that at the same cost we had budgeted this year. I need to tell you that our actual expenditure in 95-96 was $198,000. What we're counting on there is we're counting on the purchase of some new vehicles, and we'll get into that when we get to the capital expenditure part of the budget, and we think that we'll reduce our maintenance somewhat. We're not proposing, by the way, because of the fix we were in today, trading or selling any of our existing vehicles as we add to the fleet. We need them, because what I want to do, and I'll explain that when I get into my capital expenditure, the 4 that we're now leasing from Brightville for the Penndale situation, we're going to terminate that lease and that will be part of our acquisition of new vehicles or used vehicles. Gasoline is a very minimal expenditure. It's some of our vans, it's our district maintenance vehicles, but all of our buses are in fact diesel. You can see oil here. I'm sorry I said oil was in parts and tires. It's a separate category for oil. Diesel fuel, that reflects an increase. We're waiting for the IU bid so that we can give you actual in the diesel fuel category. Books are manuals that John uses as far as safety manuals and that type of thing, and also manuals that we use for service manuals with the mechanics. When we go to new equipment, it's an increase. It's a large increase. In the past, everything was always done, as you know, with bond. I am here to make a proposal tonight that I think will help us if you're at all interested in pursuing it. We can take, for an example, of the $410,000, $125,000 is for new vans. We're currently out to bid for those new vans. We desperately need those vans to streamline our fleet. There is no need to take a 19-passenger vehicle and send it across the district when you're transporting 4 or 5 kids. We need to start using vans. So we are out to bid for vans. We anticipate that expenditure to come in at $25,000 a van for $125,000. The remainder of that money will be used to purchase 1-year-old conventional buses. We are requesting 7 1-year-old conventional buses. And they will replace some of the buses that we needed to replace, quite frankly, a couple of years ago on a replacement schedule. And I don't mean the Griffith replacement schedule. I mean a replacement schedule that is a very conservative replacement schedule. We're proposing buying used. Many of our contractors across the Commonwealth are also bus dealers. They take buses out of their fleet that are 1 year old. We're looking at a bus that the way we would like to have it equipped from a safety standpoint. It is a larger size diesel engine. It's air brakes versus hydraulics. It has everything that North Penn would typically spec for the safety of our youngsters. We can buy those instead of $57,000. They will run somewhere between $46,000 and $47,000. We can enter into a lease agreement, and that lease agreement has an annual interest rate of 5.8%. And we would pay $10,900 for each vehicle for a 5-year period, and at the end of 5 years, we buy it for $1. What that does is, and we have some serious catching up to do, that allows you each year, without making a major capital expenditure, to enter into a lease agreement as we upgrade the fleet. But for this year, for an example, it allows you to back out about $205,000 or $208,000 out of that $410,000. Our recommendation would be that we ought to lease. We will be developing, we talked today about the spec that we want to put on the street. We'll develop that spec. We'll go out to bid, and we'll bid it around a 1-year-old vehicle with not to exceed 17,500 miles. By that time, the bugs are out of it. It's been serviced. These are heavy-duty vehicles, and we're very pleased to have a 1-year-old vehicle. We're not saying we should take the hit on the purchase of new buses. 72 passengers. We would then immediately use 4 of those to transport the Penndale youngsters. And quite frankly, we have anticipated transporting 225 more youngsters next year. That's usually not an increase, but we have to go back and be honest with you and tell you we're really going to be transporting 655 more youngsters compared to last September, considering we got 430 kids in January or whenever we were blindsided with the change in the ruling for the hazardous route. So we're going to increase our transportation of public kids by about 655 youngsters for next year. We're asking for 7 replacement vehicles. We will not trade or sell anything that we have. We'll look downstream, even if we keep them just for short local runs, for sports runs. They're not unsafe. We watch them closely. We would be the first one to tell you if there was frame deterioration. As long as you maintain them, keep them up, keep good tires on them, and go through the state police safety checks and inspection, as well as the state inspection, we have a comfort level with doing it. We're not saying that we want to put 25 or 30,000 miles on those per year.
Thank you, Art. Pat, any questions?
Yes, I do, please. Art, on the rider contract, why are the numbers all over the board? It was, 94, 95, it was 1,672,000, and then it went to 1,642,000, then 1,675,000.
I'll give you the
Now we're
answer.
estimated $1 million.
I wasn't involved. If you recall, that has always been a very sore subject. We always under budgeted in that area. And of course, we under budgeted again last year, but I'm saying.
But what's
like
driving this cost?
Pulling the
extra runs?
Pulling the IU back, 2.5 additional runs from the 49 to 51.5, taking the $45,000 in the summer, bringing runs back throughout the year. Midday, we have 17 midday non-public runs. The nice thing about this is it's kind of a metered service. We're not running around with empty buses. This is what it takes to transport our non-public kids.
I know I've seen some of those buses come out of the high school that are less than half full, but I expect next year they'll be full.
Three-quarters. And we've cut back, by the way. John got very creative in scheduling buses. And we worry about the day that every kid that's entitled to ride a bus at the high school shows up at the bus stop. Because we're going to be about 12 buses short. The way we've scheduled our buses.
When do you expect the diesel fuel bid to come back from the IU?
Within a week, I believe. I'll definitely have that. If I don't have it in the preliminary budget, you'll have the real number in the final budget.
Okay. And you went over it rather quickly. The 2.48% increase with rider, is that 2.4% increase each year, or?
On top of, yeah, if
So
you
it'll
follow
be
my.
2.48 this year, 2.48 next
Exactly.
year? Okay.
And that's projected on the worksheet I did for you.
Yeah, it did. I just didn't want those numbers. That's why I was asking you. Now, you're saying if we purchase these 7 buses, we'd be talking $285,000 approximately?
Approximately.
But if we enter into this is a lease purchase agreement, you're
Yep.
saying?
5th year, you pay $1, you own the bus.
So we would pay $10,900 per bus per year?
Yes.
Okay, and who will we be leasing from, or are you just going out to bid?
Depends. What will happen is, quite frankly, we will get bids, to give you an idea, we'll probably get bids from Carpenter, Wayne, Thomas, and Brightville. Each major manufacturing has their own municipal leasing business. And they lease, and we've locked the rate in, no matter when you award it, at 5.8%. There's another big advantage, and I'm not trying to cover our delay in going to bid and why we didn't nudge you a little bit sooner to get this bid out. Right now, if we were to purchase new buses, we can't have them until probably February or March of next year. The 1-year-olds, we can have June 16th if we want them. So there's an advantage to do that.
How many passenger buses are we talking?
72.
72. And one final question. This hazardous route thing, when can we have that reviewed again? Because, I have the maps, and I see students that are 2 or 3 blocks.
For another review this
You can request it at any time.
John, it just, 2 and 3 blocks away from the school, and we have to bus these children.
I understand.
I'm not blaming you, I just,
No, I understand.
it just doesn't make sense to me.
Fortunately, we
I
didn't
look
make a
at
decision.
Penndale, and I see that 1 inch by 1 inch cube that walk. And, across this, a couple streets away, we have to bus. Do you think it'd be worthwhile?
I don't
Or do you think
they'll reverse
Do
themselves.
you think it's too soon?
We don't think they'll reverse themselves.
I don't think Mr. Espada will be back. Obviously he would. We can make the request.
Do we pay for that?
No.
Okay, that's all I have.
All right, we have to do the machines. It's 25 after. Let's take a 5-minute break, get back here by 9:30. And we're starting to proceed with questions. Sharice, do you have some questions?
Yes, I do. Maybe not questions, but I have one question, and I just want to point out to the board that There is approximately another $160,000 in transportation costs located under student activities. I didn't see it listed, Art, in
Yeah.
your
That's correct.
breakdown here, so I want the board to also take that into account, that there's another 160,000 roughly. It's on page 128.
Yep. That's for anything from 8 buses going to the zoo, going to band competitions, John.
Right.
On and on about everything
trips.
related to field trips. It's a major part of our business.
But what I don't see, Art, is the, under the $30,000 for the athletic trips from the senior high.
Yep.
Are those the buses that transport from the senior high to other locations for practices and then back again to the
No,
senior high?
we have that kind of covered in our regular transportation budget.
Covered in the driver.
We have that in the driver account. We don't break that out. I mean, on a given day, most
So-
people weren't aware of it, but every day of basketball season, we took the Pembroke team to Bridle Path, and the Penfield team to Walton Farm because we didn't have enough gyms. At Penndale, we have 2 gyms. But that's all covered under our driver costs in the driver act part of the budget.
Okay, I noticed though that we don't have a late bus from the high school.
That's correct.
Is there a reason for that?
We've really not had a demand with the kids.
We have high school.
Oh, you're running one now?
Yeah,
Okay.
2 nights a week.
It's not broken out here.
Where would that be located then?
That's
Where would the
Under
cost?
drivers. We're absorbing it in drivers. We may have to go back and revisit that because we expect that we're gonna have 3 or 4 or 5 late buses next year from the high school because of the decreased parking space.
So essentially, I guess what you would need to do then is to create another category.
But then we would be taking it out of the 2,700 if we put it in the 30. So maybe we ought to just leave it the way it is. It's
Either
already,
that or put all of these in,
it's already in the budget.
or put transportation all together.
Well, we'd have to
On
look
the
at the state
concept.
budget, the accounting system and see if we could. It's apparent to me that we've never budgeted late buses high school in the 3200 category because we'd be showing that category with expenditures in past years. We only begin to take expenditures out when we're out of the 94, 95 actual. So, it would show we probably haven't done it since day one, so I think maybe we could take the money out of the 2,700 and move it there,
And also, I would like to know what the status is about Saturday bus service and where that's accounted for.
Saturday bus service to where?
Well, Mr. Cotran, the time I called you about the Saturday bus that dropped off a neighbor child of mine on a Saturday afternoon at 5 o'clock
I think you have
to his door.
You have to explain that. I immediately got in touch with John, and he had a very, very good reason why you did that. Do you recall that situation?
That particular instance, several children were late coming home, and the coach requested because of the hour, parents had missed them. And the driver
Parents, when they
accommodated.
got to the school, the parents had already left and weren't at the school. And we felt an obligation, since we were running late that day, to drop a couple of kids at their house. We just did
How many
that.
times a year does that happen?
That was extraordinary.
That's so extraordinary. We felt a safety, I called John, you called me, and I immediately called John to research it, to make sure that we weren't running a limousine service. And it was a safety issue more than anything else. Parents had been to the school, parents had left, parents that were there to pick up kids said, oh, your mom and dad left. We waited and waited, the parents didn't come back, we had 3 kids left, I believe.
3.
And the driver used good judgment, and we were very proud of him. He took them to their house.
Okay, and that's my only questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
Yes. Art, if I look on the transportation proposed budget sheet, this one here,
Yes, sir.
look under vehicle leases, I see 0 estimated for this year. Yet aren't we leasing some?
Yeah, but we had that in the rider contract, and that's another reason why the rider contract is over budget.
Okay.
At 28,004 is reflected in the estimated expenditure of $1,765,000.
Okay.
On the next page, would you tell me again your estimated cost for a brand-new bus? I thought you,
54 to 57 conventional. The numbers I gave you were for transit, which are more expensive. Stub nose flat
Yeah.
transit. We have now agreed, and John has agreed, that we need to do conventional, that we can.
okay.
We have a lot of transit buses, but we know that there are neighborhoods where we have better success with conventional.
Okay, so it's a business decision. I guess what I would like to say, you've asked us, you presented a concept to us to lease the buses at a rate of 5.8%, which to me is close enough to a bond issue without all the additional costs of a bond, without all the hassle of a bond. And it's basically a 5-year type of issue.
Yeah.
And at that rate, I would suggest that we go ahead and do it that way.
To give you a perfect example, Bus 80 was purchased in 1984, has 176,000 miles on. I mean, it's ready to retire before we've paid it off under a bond issue. And as I explained to Mr. Mosey in an earlier conversation, if we start going after the fleet, and let's use easy numbers, instead of 10,900, let's round to 10,000. If we have an outlay this year of $70,000 to get 7 buses, next year if you would do 7, that's 140, and you go from 140 to 210, but in the 5th year, when you would probably stop because our fleet would be up to date, you're back buying for $1, and now you have a declining lease payment each year until you buy everything out for $1.
Yeah, well, you don't have to sell me on the concept. It seems to make sense, and I've always been a believer in pay for things as quickly as you can. So, I'm done. Thank you.
Very good. Dave?
Art, what other kind of things are in that $90,000 estimated expenditure in the rider transportation? You mentioned the lease of the buses. What other kinds of things? Were there additional runs this year that we've added?
Let me give you an example. There's about $45,000 in summer work that we did last year. We don't know what this summer is going to be because Judy keeps identifying additional youngsters, and rightly so. We're pleased that we can do them through the rider contract. Last year, I can only give you a guide of $45,000. $45,000 there, $28,400 for the lease, 17 midday runs, non-public, 51.5 morning and afternoon runs, non-public, the facility rental.
Okay. I'm just looking for some examples of where the
In fact, they're all
estimated is
examples.
coming from.
I can't make up anymore, they're all.
And
Praise Oliver.
Can't make up any.
and also you mentioned that you were expecting 600 additional students for the 97-98 school year.
655 qualify that compared to this past September, but 430 of them are a result of the hazardous route at Dale. So we're only anticipating 225 additional new students to be transported.
Okay. Accept those numbers just as they are. How many students can we even guesstimate that we're going to have to bus once we lose the parking spaces at the high school?
Well, let's assume that you're taking 88 spaces and everybody brings a buddy. Max.
I wouldn't assume everybody brings a buddy.
Well, but I do that when I'm figuring
Okay,
so
yeah.
I double 288 and say that I'm going to have approximately 550 kids that but some of those 550 will go on the empty buses that Pat's alluding to. The problem time we have, 2 things will happen, and I need to tell you, and I didn't, that the other consideration in our transportation budget is every time we have a special event and we use either the tech school or Calvary, we will be running shuttle buses because of the lack of parking. So that's another contaminant. But overall, if we add 550 kids that can no longer drive or ride with a friend, we can assume that many of those kids will interface in existing buses because they already have a seat on the bus. But John, when you folks sent us back last year, he got very creative about reducing, and we learned in talking to our colleagues in other districts, that if they need 23 buses to move all the kids that are entitled to a ride in a high school, they schedule 17, and hope that on a nicey day, when the parents say you can't drive, I mean, you have to get creative in a hurry.
All right. And one other question you or John can answer for me. It's not a budget issue, but space in the bus compound for the additional vehicles.
We have room for, if we go with the 7 buses, the 4 lease buses that we're going to end the lease. Currently, those 4 are in-house. We have space for 3 more buses, and then we are at capacity.
How about the vans?
They too.
The vans, fortunately, they'll take a small space. They're a Dodge, regular Dodge or Chevrolet or Ford van. But what we will do, we are picking up, the tech school is kind enough, we're gonna have 72 new paved parking spaces for drivers. They'll enter off of Sunday Town, they'll park there, walk through a gate to drive our vehicles, which will help us behind APOD. But then we're gonna take an area where they're now parking and pave that and fence it to put buses in.
Okay, because I know in years past, we've been filled to the brim and
We have
stacked.
employees parking inside who are going to go outside with the VOTEC plant.
Okay,
About a
thank you.
dozen employees.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll let you.
Thank you.
Okay. Art, I'm glad you brought up the vote tech. That is we are supposed to be able to assume some of those parking spaces for the upcoming school.
72.
For the upcoming school year, correct?
Yeah, they'll be paving there in July. If you've passed the VOTEC, you'll see that the new basin is in out front. They're really moving the project.
And they got their building permits today.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I thought maybe something had been delayed on that at first.
No.
I heard about limited space. Art, with this rider proposal, I'm glad to hear that everything's been going well. I personally, my sense is that ever since, from the very, the first snowfall at the very beginning, things have gone rather smoothly. It is not it hasn't been something that's been reaching to me as a board member, what have you. I think it's a courtesy, though, it would be good probably just to put out a letter to the principals, not down, just let the building level or top administrator of those that are served that we are considering there, and certainly if they have any direct input, that they should forward it to you, just to show respect and consideration, since it is the children of their schools that are being shuttled.
They have a wonderful rapport with the rider people. This rider operation in Montgomery Township happens to be, quite frankly, a model rider system across the Commonwealth. People come from all over to see it. And part of that, I think, is really attributable to John and the training. We sent 2 people there. Their safety trainer, a young lady who was with us, just does a sensational job, but she also does a lot of good PR with our non-public schools. And I will certainly follow up with a letter through the rider process to all of our 80 schools that we're currently transporting to, so that they know that. But believe me, if they were unhappy, now I'm talking the Gwynedd Mercies, the Germantown Academies, the LaSalle High School, our phone would jump off the hook. I mean,
I believe that, but I think it also means something to them that we're thinking of them and that we're doing that.
We've enjoyed a good relationship. We're
Right.
pleased.
I'm super, I kind of lean towards just moving this forward with an extension too, as long as it's practical and reasonable. When you have these runs that are listed here, and you list, say, 162.39 per day per bus, is that for any number of runs? I mean, does a bus only make one run necessarily? I mean, some of these are making a couple different runs, aren't they?
Not necessarily. They can, John, you might want to address that.
That's morning and afternoon, and it can be anywhere from 1 to 5 schools.
Right, and so this per day rate, though, is no matter how many different runs and how,
Makes no difference. They base their contract on a 4.7-hour day.
okay, 4.7 hours. So it's more a matter of however many runs they have in within that daily time. Okay, because I've heard before that this is the rate per run, and now I have it as per day, and that.
We want to do it per day. We like the idea of doing it per day.
this
Because,
is a
John, you have to remember one thing. When we have that quoted per day per bus, John is doing the schedules.
Right.
So it's to our advantage to have it per day, per bus instead of per
Right,
load.
but it was a changeover, and it does have some meaning as we evaluate this. Okay, thanks very much, appreciate it.
All right, we've got through there's one more item on the agenda, but looking at the hour and looking at the established policy that we've made well up to the budget of concluding this by 10 o'clock, we have not had audience of citizens yet, so I would like to open at this time for audience of citizens. Is there anybody there that would like to address the board? Seeing none?
You do it to them too.
Oh, seriously,
I like
does
his
anybody
style.
like to address the board? I guess there is none.
Yes, there is.
Yes. Would you get to there and give your name and?
Jerry Vigiletti, Hatfield Township.
Yes.
I was just wondering about when we replace equipment, like you were talking about the tractor and the snow blower earlier. When we replace equipment like that, do we sell off the old equipment?
We typically, what we do, and you will notice in past bids, if it's worthy of trade, I will list it as a trade. We've gotten some excellent trades. In this case, we're looking at a unit that is no longer manufactured, and we will keep it for parts because we have two others like it.
Okay.
We do our own in-house service. We have a service center for mowers and tractors and so forth.
Okay. For things that are sold off, does that money come under, in this budget book, under the other financing sources? Or is that somewhere?
What I typically will do, if I'm proposing an expenditure of $15,000, and initially I have a feeling that I'll get a $2,000 bill, I'll show the expenditure at $13,000.
Okay, good enough, thank you.
Any other questions? One other information item, the next meeting of the board to discuss budget items and other items will be a regular work session on Tuesday, May 6th at 7:30. So we'll continue with the item that we didn't cover tonight and any other open items that we have. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Adjourn.